What's up, guys? It's Fantasy Joe here, back again with some more fantasy content for the 2021 season, bringing you some Dynasty content, also some rookie content if you're a 2021 redraft player this year. We're going to be discussing who should be considered for the top Dynasty rookie picks and who should be the first rookies taken in redrafts this year. Going over what they did in college, things like that, different skills they possess, where they may be lacking, what I'm looking to see from them, potential where they could end up that could be very good for them, things like that. Obviously, we won't know a lot about these players until their landing spots, but I feel confident in the players that I'm talking about today that these will be the top picks almost regardless of landing spots, just based on their talent and their draft capital that will be spent on them. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe down below, drop us a comment, drop us a like on the video, helps us out a lot. Without further ado, let's get right into it. First player we have up, we've got JaMarr Chase. So JaMarr Chase sat out the 2020 season because of COVID concerns, but in 2019 with Joe Burrow, he absolutely balled. On only 111 targets, he was able to secure 84 receptions, good for 1,780 yards, 20 touchdowns. Just to put this into perspective, he was by far the number one wide receiver on that team. And I say by far because Justin Jefferson was also on that team, who we also saw just go rattle off 1,400 yards in his rookie season, a new rookie record. But Justin Jefferson, let's just read off his stats the year that he was with Joe Burrow at LSU. He had 134 targets, good for 111 receptions for 1,540 yards and 18 touchdowns. So on 134 targets, he had less yards and less touchdowns than JaMarr Chase did. He did have more receptions, but I think that just shows just how explosive a player JaMarr Chase is. And I think that's one of the only real weaknesses. I don't even know if it is considered a weakness that's on JaMarr Chase's game. But is the only cause for concern is he going to be a blazing speed guy? But if he comes out and runs a good 40 time, anything in the 4.4s for him would be absolutely awesome, I think. And I think he could run that. Jefferson came out and ran a 4.4, and that was big for him too. It wasn't because it just pushed him over, but when you just look at the production he had, and then you were able to post a solid time like that, it lets you know that not only is this guy a really good football player, but he's also a pretty darn good athlete as well. I think it's going to be very interesting to see where JaMarr Chase goes. I think he'll probably be the number one receiver taken. I think he's the best receiver in this year's draft class or last year's draft class, honestly, including Devonta Smith and Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb. All those guys are great, but I would take JaMarr Chase over all of them if I was an NFL team. All right, so let's move on to the next player we have up, who is Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith went for 117 receptions, 1,856 yards, and 23 receiving touchdowns last year in 2020 for Alabama. And he won the Heisman Trophy as a wide receiver, which was the first time since Desmond Howard, I believe, to win that award, which is pretty remarkable. He was absolutely dynamite this season. If you want to take him over JaMarr Chase, I really can't argue with you. I mean, you're picking. They're just so neck and neck. I think the NFL is probably going to take Chase a little earlier, just because, like I said last when we were discussing Chase, I just think that JaMarr Chase's talent and efficiency that he's shown at the college level. I mean, he put up a similar stat line to what Devonta Smith put up on 111 targets, and Devonta Smith had 147 targets this year. So again, another big target boost, but. I mean, Devonta Smith absolutely balled. I think he was. You can argue he's the best player in the country straight up this year, I think. And I mean, he won the Heisman Trophy, obviously, so some people have argued it. But I just think that he is. What he can do from a route running perspective, and I think he's a guy who I don't think is going to have many problems with the 40. I think he's going to easily run the 4.4s, maybe even faster. If he's a 4.3 guy, I think all concerns of him will disappear. I don't know if he's going to be that fast, but people are going to care a lot less that he's 175 pounds if he comes out there and runs a 4.38 or something like that when you have that kind of production. And I just think I don't think NFL teams should be afraid of taking the high draft pick on Devonta Smith, because we've seen how good of a football player he is, and it's just is 10 pounds really going to be the difference between you selecting a guy in the top 10, just him putting on, because I feel like once he gets to the NFL, he's a guy who's shown that, he works hard in college. He stayed 4 years at Alabama, could have left and probably been a first-round draft pick last year, came back this year, helped himself out. I think he's a guy, that once he gets to the NFL team, he's going to throw the weight on, and it's going to be a beast for fantasy, a beast for whatever team drafts him. I think he knows how to get open right away at the NFL, and I think he's going to be ready to succeed. So I think he is another top pick when it comes to this Dynasty draft for sure. And I think just the debate when it comes down to running backs, wide receivers, if they're the same talent level, I'm probably going to take a wide receiver. Now, of course, that depends on landing spot as well, where these guys end up getting drafted and the draft capital that's spent on them. But I think when you're getting a top player like Devonta Smith or JaMarr Chase, and you could have one of these guys for the next 10 to 15, 12 years, something like that, it's hard to really pass on them when you could get, look at Ezekiel Elliott a few years ago. He's a top Dynasty pick, and maybe he ends up playing another 5 years and being a beast, but right now he's a late second-round pick at only 25 years old. That's the reality of the running back position as far as wear and tear goes, So, that said, I would consider both JaMarr Chase and Devonta Smith with a 101, depending on where their landing spots end up. Moving on to the next player, my RB1 in this class, we have Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne in the 2018 and 2019 season, he rushed for over 1,600 yards and 20 total touchdowns both years. Over the last 2 years, he's caught over 80 passes. He has just been a fantasy, or not even a fantasy, but just a beast at Clemson. He is the ACC's all-time leading rusher and leader in touchdowns. He really lit that league on fire. I think he's a guy who, once he gets to the NFL, is going to be a freak. I think talent-wise, I think he's somewhere in between an Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook type. I think he reminds me of a little bit more explosive Dalvin Cook. I don't know if he'll necessarily be able to take the workload of a Dalvin Cook. That's why I said Dalvin Kamara. Maybe he gets closer to an Alvin Kamara-like workload. But depending on where he weighs in, I don't think he's a small back necessarily. He is very explosive, but he's just like his acceleration is just like when he sees that hole, he gets through it and just, it's just like when he sees yards up in front of him, he just eats them up with his acceleration. So I think he's going to be able to succeed in a major way at the next level in both the running game and the passing game, which is what you want from your fantasy running backs. So I think he is another top Dynasty pick that I'd be willing to spend a high Dynasty draft pick on. Next up, we have Najee Harris, another talented back who can catch the ball and run it. He's a guy who has no real size concerns or anything. He is 6'2", 230, ran for over 1,400 yards last year and caught 43 passes for Alabama on their way to winning the national championship and scored 30 total touchdowns. He was an absolute beast in 2020. He leaves Alabama's all-time leader in both touchdowns and rushing yards, I believe, which is, obviously a storied college team. They've had Trent Richardson, Mark Ingram, Sean Alexander, Derrick Henry. There's been a multitude of great NFL running backs and talented college running backs that have played there, and he has more yards than all of them. The thing that I really love about Najee Harris is that he is a big back who can also be used in the passing game. I think he's a guy who's going to, if somebody uses, because the narrative right now is he's going to be a back of the first, early second round pick. And if somebody uses that high of a draft pick on him, he's going to get the ball in the running game a lot, and he's a talented pass catcher. So there's no excuse for him to not get the ball in the running game because of his size, and his draft capital, I think. So I think he is just going to get immediate opportunity. And like I said, in the passing game, he's not just a big guy who can catch the ball, who's got consistent hands. He's a fluid pass catcher. We saw him utilize in the national championship game especially. And just throughout the entire year, he was dangerous in the passing game, and improved in that as a junior, and improved even more in that going into his senior season. And he's really an NFL-ready back, I think. Even though he played behind a very talented offensive line in Alabama, I think he's a guy who's just going to put his head down and work when he gets to the league and can be very talented. Next up, we have one of the most exciting players in this whole process, Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is an absolute athletic freak. Just a massive man. Athletically, people have talked about him testing-wise close to a Calvin Johnson type. He has that kind of height and speed combination. Maybe not, the 4.3s at 6'5" and that big, but he's 6'5", 6'6". He had 43 receptions last year, 770 yards, good for 12 touchdowns in 2020, and he only played 8 games. I mean, this guy was a beast. And I think when watching him, the thing that jumps out to me is he's a big guy who has really, really good movement skills and really good hands. He can catch in traffic. He can catch around guys. He can go up over the top and get it. He's got great speed to beat you. And, I think is going to be a guy who's ready to contribute in the red zone immediately at the NFL level, ready to beat guys over the top immediately at the NFL level. Whether he ends up as a tight end or a receiver, he might be some kind of mix. I see him more as a tight end in the NFL personally, but it's going to depend on who uses him and how they choose to utilize him. But I think he'll be able to do both of those skill sets well. And honestly, if you want to take Kyle Pitts, there's no pick I think that's too high to take Kyle Pitts in fantasy, in dynasty in dynasty drafts, rookie drafts to me, because if you hit, trying to scout the tight end position, especially for rookie newcomers, is you're not going to find a guy that looks like Kyle Pitts maybe for another 10 years. I think the best athletic prospect to come out, I'm trying to think of someone to compare him to, and I just can't even think of anyone coming out of college that was as NFL, that was the dynamic threat that he was at the tight end position and was known coming out of the draft. So I just don't know if you're going to have this opportunity to draft a tight end that could be this good again. You might be in 2 years from now or 3 years from now, you might have a guy who is, I think he can contribute right away too, but 2-3 years from now, you could have the number one tight end in fantasy for the next 10 years or 5 years, Go on a Travis Kelce stretch where he just dominates the position because he's just an athletic freak and nobody can stop him. I could see that happening very easily. And if he goes to a good quarterback or a good organization that can put some talent around him, get him the ball, sky is the limit for Kyle Pitts. So there's no pick that's too early to take Kyle Pitts, in my opinion. Moving on to our last player that will be discussed today. I don't think he's worth the top pick, but I definitely think he's worth the discussion with some of these guys for those top picks. 1 through 5 at least, or 1 through 6. And that's Jaylen Waddle. Last year he was only playing 6 games, but he had 28 receptions for 591 yards and 4 touchdowns. So as you can see, he missed a lot of the season with injury. And that picture there of him and Devonta Smith, one of the criticisms on Devonta Smith, and I don't think it's fair to Devonta Smith, but a lot of people say, and I think it's true, that he wouldn't have won the Heisman if Jaylen Waddle never got injured. Jaylen Waddle was averaging basically 100 yards a game, even when you're counting games where he was playing partially. In the national championship, he wasn't utilized entirely in that game, and he got injured in the game as well, so he missed time in that one, and he's still averaging basically 100 yards a game. The thing when it comes to Jaylen Waddle and why people are putting him in this group and why I think he should be put into this group, at least we discuss, is the kid can absolutely fly. If you thought Henry Ruggs could run, this guy can run. He's dynamic with the ball in his hands ever since he was a freshman. Actually, the most receiving yards he ever had at Alabama was as a freshman. The kid can just, I think he hit 24 miles an hour on the field, running, and I don't think anyone has hit that in the NFL that's been charted yet. So I just think, just to put that into perspective, he's just a freak athlete, and it is just if he goes to the right location where he's going to be, a guy who is getting jet sweeps and being utilized creatively and just given the ball and getting some downfield shots, if he's a guy who can get the ball in his hands, give him 6 targets and 2 jet sweeps or a flip it to him once or something a game, I think he could be dynamic for fantasy, and I think he's a guy that should be considered with these other wide receivers because I think 2 years from now he's going to be, he could be just as talented potentially depending on where he lands. If you like this video, please drop a like on it, comment down below. If you have any questions or any players that you think I should have put into this video, let me know. There are definitely other players that are amongst the top dynasty picks, first-round picks. I was just talking about the top tier of guys I'm talking about today and guys I think should be considered depending on landing spots. These are probably my top 6 picks going into the 2020 redraft and dynasty drafts. If you're new and you made it to the end, please subscribe. It helps us out a lot. This is Fantasy Joe signing off.